The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 21. The Evils of Female Genital Mutilation. The American couple Samir and Samira spent 2 months with the old woman Sakina, and her daughter-in-law Salwa, and the 3 rival wives of the polygamous butcher. During that time, they hardly went out of the house. There is nothing on the streets or the local market of interest to them. The streets are always full of filthy garbage. There are no garbage containers. People throw their garbage in any accessible area. Flies are in millions everywhere and mosquitoes in billions at night. The roads are crowded with men and domestic animals. There is always dust and people look like they have been buried in their graves and dug out and allowed to roam around in dirty clothes. There are many stray dogs with no apparent owners in sight, many of which are stricken with rabies. There are absolutely no establishments for entertainment. No movie theater, no nightclub, no beach, no river, no swimming pool, no gym, not even any public park, and no safe and healthy restaurants. In Western Sudan, rats and locusts are considered edible. The few restaurants in the local market are as filthy as hell. Sometimes, in a restaurant, you can be cheated and served a cooked lump of dog meat or meat of wild beasts. There is no internet service, and hence no international TV channels. The local TV has 1 channel in Arabic. The TV in Sudan is called a small mosque. It always talks about Islam and prayers. The radio is likewise in Arabic. Sometimes, you can get some news in the African language from the neighboring country Chad. The American couple never tried to purchase a TV or a radio. They felt as if they had been cast out of the world and landed in a deserted planet. Living in Saudi Arabia is much better than living in Western Sudan. In addition to all these, the temperature is always extremely hot throughout the year. The falling of rain during autumn is an exceedingly rare occurrence. Samir spends most of his time sitting alone in his hut in the men's section. Comparatively, Samira has a relatively more enjoyable time. She spends each day socializing with the 2 widows Sakina and Salwa, the 2 Eritrean girls Mona and Zahara, the 3 rival wives, and their many children. For 2 months, she could not catch as much as a glance of the polygamous husband of the 3 women. She became friendly with Salwa and the 3 wives. They are all genuinely fond of her, and heap compliments on her beauty and good nature each time they meet. From them, she learned many Arabic words and phrases. Her Eritrean interpreter girl Mona is always with her everywhere she goes. Whatever she saw or learned about the 5 women is duly archived by her husband on his laptop. In a brief time, they built a big database of their daily life in En-Nahid town. While the American couple Samir and Samira are engrossed in their fieldwork, a terrible incident threatened to halt their research, carry up their belongings, and return to their country. One day, one of the 3 wives proudly invited Samira to the circumcision celebration of one of her little daughters. The so-called happy occasion is scheduled to take place in 3 days. When Samir heard about the sad news, he told Samira to try by all means available to convince the Muslim woman that what she intends to do to her little daughter is going to harm rather than benefit her. The mother is shocked when she hears that circumcision would harm her daughter. Therefore, she gave Samira a long lecture on the benefits of female circumcision and the danger of leaving an uncircumcised daughter to grow up in Muslim society. She emphatically stated that it is a required religious obligation for every Muslim girl. She mentioned to Samira 3 authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad commanding female genital mutilation. 1. Atya al-Ansariya narrated that a woman used to circumcise in Medina, and the Prophet said to her, "Do not overdo it, because this makes a woman more favorable and it is more agreeable." Sahih al-Bukhari. This hadith revealed that the Prophet Muhammad did not forbid the woman from circumcising small girls. 2. Aisha narrated that the Prophet Muhammad said, "When a man sits between her 4 parts, legs and arms of his wife, and the 2 circumcised parts meet, the husband's penis and the wife's vagina meet during sexual intercourse, then ghusl ablution becomes obligatory." Sahih Muslim. So once again, this hadith showed that Muhammad approved of female genital mutilation. 3. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Circumcision is a sunnah for men and a preservation of honor for women." Muwatta Malik and Sunan Abu Dawud. This hadith said that the Prophet Muhammad believed female genital mutilation helps the circumcised Muslim girl to preserve the honor of herself and her family by not indulging in premarital sex. 9 hadiths encourage female genital mutilation, but these 3 are the most famous and quoted by Muslim leaders, scholars, and ordinary Muslim people to support the circumcision of small girls. Despite her considerable efforts, Samira failed to convince the mother not to circumcise her little daughter. Following the commandment of their Prophet Muhammad, Muslims circumcise their girls to preserve the honor of their families. Every Muslim girl must be circumcised at the age of 4 or 5. Female genital mutilation or cutting involves the removal of the sealing of the labia majora and the labia minora together after the entire clitoris has been removed, quoting Lois, 1985, page number 115. When a Muslim girl undergoes female genital mutilation, she becomes abnormal. Her vagina will be so narrowed and sealed that it is reduced to a small opening that allows the girl only to urinate. Usually, the woman performing the circumcision will use a small thin reed or feather to measure the hole that is supposed to be left open after the procedure is done. The small hole will not allow a finger to penetrate the vagina. Therefore, when the girl reaches adolescence, she is bound to have serious problems with the menstrual blood. Due to the small opening, some of the blood remains, causing infection. Many young Sudanese girls suffer from a genital disease called Hibin. This disease is caused by the blood that remains inside the vagina, and unless the girl goes for medical surgery, the infected private parts may cause death. However, due to the fear of losing the girl's virginity through medical surgery, or the prospect of widening her vagina, some families will not allow their sick daughters to go to the hospital to see a doctor. The reason behind this evil practice, as stated by the Prophet Muhammad, the preservation of honor for women. That means to prevent the girl from engaging in premarital sex. In other words, female circumcision will not allow the circumcised girl to practice sex before marriage even if she wants to do so. The circumcised girl will experience unbearable pain during sexual intercourse, and that makes her feels as if she is being raped. That is what the Prophet Muhammad meant by the preservation of honor. He meant to say that circumcision would prevent her from having sex before marriage. She will not be able even to indulge in masturbation. Therefore, female circumcision or cutting is meant to control the sexuality of the girl and destroy her desire for the opposite sex. It is barbaric, painful, and harms the woman. What troubled Samira was the primitive and cruel way that the operation was performed by a woman who had absolutely no medical knowledge. She has not gone to a medical college or a nursing school. She is an illiterate woman who has never been to school in all her life. Somehow, the Indian wife Samira forced herself to attend the barbaric procedure of female genital mutilation. It was her American husband who requested her to witness it, and then she could come and report to him that she has seen. On the day of the so-called happy occasion, the midwife or an expert circumciser woman has subjected a 4-year-old girl to the most brutal operation that Samira ever witnessed in her life. Being born as a Muslim girl, Samira was not circumcised because Indian Muslims are not allowed to practice it in India. The tiny girl has been securely tied up with strong ropes, hands and legs. Then her mother carried her in her arms and took her to a dark room lighted with a dim lamp. There is already a woman who is called the circumciser and the midwife. She has to help pregnant women to deliver their babies and to circumcise little girls. It mattered not that the woman had not attended a day of school. She inherited her profession from her mother, who in turn acquired it from her grandmother, who got it from her great-grandmother, and so on and so on. At first, the little girl is oblivious and not knowing what is going to happen to her. But when she saw the midwife, she thought they were going to squeeze a baby out of her stomach. Her mother removed the ropes from her legs and forced her to lie on her back. The little girl began to scream and kick out with her small legs. Her fear intensified when she saw the midwife holding a razor in her right hand and a kitchen knife in her left hand. Her mother closed her mouth with her hands. The child has become extremely terrified. She has become convinced that the woman is going to slice her throat up with the razor and open up her stomach with the knife, and all the people she has come to trust, holding her down. Though she is so little girl and has a tiny body, she puts so much resistance that her mother must call for help. Samira has declined the mother's request for help. Therefore, the neighbors, Sakina and Salwa, have been called in for assistance. The two widows gladly lend their hands for help on this important happy occasion. Each one of them held one leg of the child and spread it as far as she could. Now the small girl could neither resist nor scream. That part done, the midwife began to examine the private parts of the small girl. She used a wet piece of cloth to clean up the tiny vagina and the area around it. That piece of cloth is dipped and soaked in warm water. There are no painkillers or anesthetics for freezing near her. First, the circumciser cut off the child's clitoris, and then sliced the labia majora and labia minora, and removed generous portions of them. She is using the razor and the knife. It took a while before the entire clitoris was removed. The circumciser asked the mother to insert her fingers inside her child's vagina to ensure that nothing of the clitoris remained. During this time, two grown-up women holding the little girl are not enough to stifle her struggles. Once again, Samira has been requested by the mother to help, but she adamantly refuses. Instead, she felt like jumping over the heartless mother and strangling her to death. The mother cannot call any of the two rival wives to come for assistance, for she knows none of them will help her. They are jealous and envious women, and hence do not want such happiness to happen to the daughter of the rival wife. The three women, Sakina, Salwa, and the mother began to encourage each other, and that helped them to increase their hold on the child's resisting body. The so-called female expert circumciser used a small reed to measure the opening that to be left open after the circumcision procedure is over. When she began to seal the two sliced labia majora and labia minora together, the pain increased to an unbearable state. Suturing involved a big needle and local reeds. Meanwhile, the small girl is bleeding profusely. Blood is gushing out of her private parts like red water. Both the hands of the circumciser are covered with blood. Even part of her dress is smeared with blood. The clothes of her mother, Sakina, and Salwa are not spared. After that, the woman inserted the reed inside the child's vagina. It is the size of a straw that accompanies a soft drink or soda. The main reason behind this barbaric practice is to close the vagina up or to put a chastity belt on the girl's private parts. This is done so that when she grows up, she will not be able to commit adultery before her marriage. Only her future groom is supposed to break that seal and take away her virginity. However, no man's phallus can penetrate through such a small opening. In many African countries, especially Somalia and Eritrea, the bride will be taken to the hospital to open her up before the first wedding night. Many grooms may not agree to such a widening operation, and hence they will rape their brides no matter how much effort that may entail. Some of them will use a knife or a pair of scissors to widen their brides' vaginas. Therefore, many wedding nights ended up in a hospital. The Indian wife Samira could not control her nerves any longer, and hence lost consciousness, and collapsed on the floor before the circumciser finished placing the stitches on the child's mutilated private parts. From that day and onwards, she always shudders and gets scared when emotionally recollecting that day of the brutal circumcision procedure of the 4-year-old Muslim girl. She regretted she followed the request of her American husband, and attended that barbaric procedure of female genital mutilation. That poor genitally mutilated child, thankfully, has also fainted before the stitching of her labia majora and labia minora is completed. Before completely sealing them together, the circumciser filled the vagina with mimosa nilotic powder from the acacia nilotic tree. This powder causes so much burning sensation and pain, as if filling someone's eyes with red-hot chili powder or pouring acid on somebody's face. The purpose of this powder is to glue the labia majora and labia minora together forever. After the reed is removed, only a small opening is created. Ancient Egyptians used the acacia powder for embalming and creating mummies of their pharaohs. The process of sealing the two labia together is considered the most important part of the circumcision procedure. The woman circumciser used a needle and a strong filament, known as a sab in Arabic, in the place of sutures. The remnants of both labia majora and labia minora are stitched together along the vertical axis until she reaches the reed she has inserted earlier. The reed is placed at the lower end of the vagina, which is near the rectum. Therefore, the vagina's opening is completely closed from one end to another end. It is just like her tiny vagina has been completely closed up by a secure padlock. The circumciser placed as many stitches as necessary to guarantee a completely closed orifice, except for the reed. In some cases, the circumcision process may be repeated if a mother determines that the hole has elongated to the point where it can allow male erected phallus access and penetrate her adolescent daughter's pussy. This stitching or sealing of the female circumcision will create a huge ugly scar or keloid as the girl matures. The process mutilates the vagina, so it looks like a human face that has been deprived of its nose, eyes, mouth, and ears. Sometimes, even pubic hair cannot grow in such a completely mutilated pussy. The closed-up part of the girl's private parts cannot be opened again in the future. Some doctors in Europe tried to help the genitally mutilated Muslim women by attempting to reopen the closed private parts of their mutilated vaginas, but to no avail. The surgery did not confer many benefits for the female victim, as it could not restore the pleasurable sensation typically felt by an uncircumcised girl. A genitally mutilated girl will never have a clitoral orgasm. One researcher on this topic observed that female genital mutilation equals the passing of a death sentence on the sexuality of a Muslim woman. When she grows up, she will discover that she is having a dead pussy. As we mentioned above, the main aim of this evil practice is to prevent those circumcised Muslim girls from having sex before their marriages. Intercourse with such a sexually mutilated girl will simply be impossible. It is just like locking up the girl's vagina, or putting a secure lock on her private parts. The pre-Islamic Arabs used to fashion underwear made from iron and place them around the private parts of their women. That iron underwear was called Hizm al-Ifa, which means the belt of honor. When their women were taken captives, the captors might not be able to rape them. The same primitive idea passed on to Muslims and practiced today, in an eviler way through female genital mutilation. Instead of putting that iron underwear and locking them up, in Islam locks are placed on the girls' vaginas. Moreover, in Islam, by removing the girl's clitoris, labia majora, and labia minora, her sexual organ will be destroyed and mutilated to the point that she loses all desire for sex. Some Muslims argue that those private parts, which the midwife excises during the circumcision, will grow again. This is not true. The clitoris, the labia majora, and the labia minora will never grow again. Once they are removed, they are gone forever. After the so-called happy ceremony, the midwife tied up the legs of the child together. The idea is to immobilize the little girl for no less than a couple of weeks, tied up until her wounds are healed. During that time, she is to be completely confined to bed. She must urinate inside her bandage, but she defecates in a small bowl until her wounds are healed, and then the ropes will be removed, and she will be set free. Usually, most Muslim girls will be circumcised at the age of 4 or 5. Muslims believe that when the circumcised girl reaches the age of adolescence, she will not be able to indulge in sex even if she wants to do so. Any girl trying to indulge herself in sex will experience unbearable pain and feel as if she is being raped. This is the overriding reason for this procedure, to prevent her from having sex before marriage. Therefore, female genital mutilation or circumcision is meant to control the sexuality of the woman and destroy her desire for the opposite sex. In this line of thinking, there is a belief among Muslims that the uncircumcised girl can easily succumb to her sexual desire. Even if her underwear rubs her private parts, she will experience uncontrollable sexual desire, and nothing will abate her desire for masturbation or adultery. This is simply not the case for a circumcised girl. She is always in control of her sexuality, and is extremely hard to arouse her sexual desire. Due to the small hole that had been created in her pussy post-circumcision, the girl is considered always a virgin. Therefore, Muslim men believe that the circumcised girl is more sexually enjoyable than the uncircumcised girl. But as we mentioned already, the circumcised girl has a dead pussy, and therefore, she does not enjoy sex. Sex for her is unbearable torture. There is a belief that such a girl prefers to have anal sex instead of vaginal sex. Chapter 22. The ambivalence facing Muslim women. After being a first-hand female witness of the horrors of the brutal procedure of female genital mutilation, Samira confided to her husband. She convinced him to forego doing further fieldwork on Muslim women's abuse. She argued that the women and their children themselves are victims of the capricious and malicious religious teachings inherited from their parents, and will naturally pass them over to the next generation. They were conditioned to believe from childhood that the teachings were divinely inspired to their infallible prophet, and hence they are unquestionably right. Samir agreed with his wife's intelligent evaluation of the social life of Muslim women, as he understood only too well how religion can be used everywhere, and at any time by people of all walks of life to abuse their fellow human beings. Mulling over the matter, however, he has a change of mind. He eventually reasoned with his Indian wife that if they abandoned their research and distanced themselves from these incidents just to avoid discomfort, they would effectively abandon all the nameless and hapless children and the victimized women. He believes that it is their duty and divine calling to witness the evil practices and later expose them to the entire world. The American husband wondered why the typical American feminists never seemed to speak out against these evil practices. He struggled with the possible reasons why Muslim feminists in the West seem to deny and trivialize the practices, claiming they have nothing to do with Islam. It is common to hear that female genital mutilation is simply an African custom with no Islamic basis. Western Muslim feminists simply do not pay much attention to the practice of female genital mutilation because they live in Western countries where it is illegal and punishable by the law. Therefore, neither they nor their daughters are victims of the practice of female circumcision. Besides, and perhaps more importantly, they do not want to be accused of following a religion that encourages and justifies female genital mutilation. Their silence effectively convinces the listeners that the practice is simply un-Quranic. Accordingly, they argue that since female genital mutilation is not mentioned in the Quran, then it has nothing to do with Islam, but it is merely an old African custom that predated Islam. Some of them say it is an ancient Egyptian custom practiced by the pharaohs. For that reason, they call it the Pharaonic or Sudanese female circumcision. But such false claim could not be proved through archaeology or historical research on the lives of those ancient Egyptians. The Jews used to live among those Egyptian pharaohs, and none of them in the past or today circumcise their daughters. They turn a blind eye to the authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad that command female genital mutilation, and to the texts in the most authentic books of the Sunnah, such as Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. If all Muslim clerics follow their logic and agree with this line of thinking, that bona fide Islamic teachings have to be taken only from the Quran, then they cannot teach their followers how many prayers to perform in a day, how to do them, how to perform ablution, how to fast during the month of Ramadan, how to perform the Hajj rituals, how to become a Muslim, how to say the Islamic creed when embracing Islam, Shahada, how to conduct a marriage contract, how many wives Muhammad married, what are their names, and so on. All these religious practices and essential information are not to be found in the Quran, but were taken directly from the books of the Hadiths and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. The Quran has less than 25% of the teachings of the Sharia laws. In actual fact, the Quran is nothing except a repetitive book that keeps on repeating the stories of some Old Testament prophets, some Jewish Talmudic legends, and Arab folklore. It is simply a fallacious argument that Muslim feminists perpetuate the evil practices because they cannot convince other Muslims the teachings are not genuine teachings of the Sunnah of the Prophet of Islam. Muslims all over the world know that from the very beginning not all Islamic practices and rituals had been drawn from the Quran alone. The Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, his sayings and deeds, which are called hadiths and sirah, constitute over 75% of the teachings of Islam. The majority of the bulk of teachings on women are found in the Sunnah and not the Quran. The Muslim feminists and other intellectual Muslims living in the West falsely represent Islam and collectively hide the evils that children and women experience in their lives simply because of the misogynistic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. Unfortunately, Western feminists are also carried away with such deception and believe every word an educated Muslim woman teaches them about Islam. Accordingly, we find many feminists in America and all over the Western world who are ready to support the arguments that Islam is innocent of all the Arabic and African cultural practices such as female genital mutilation, child marriage, polygamy, wife-beating, and restricting the movement of women and imprisoning them in the houses. Most Western feminists today follow postmodernism, which is created by socialist philosophers such as Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Martin Heidegger, and Jean-François Lyotard, and directed against capitalist countries such as America. They argue that the Enlightenment thinkers invented reason to create ideologies that enabled the white men, the males, and the West to subjugate and dominate the non-white people, their female counterparts, and the non-Western countries. Accordingly, Western feminists feel their only enemy is the white male who invented reason and began to own them as chattels, wives, and prostitutes. Therefore, they rejected the validity of human reason, knowledge, truth, and progressive culture. For them, all cultures are relatively true. There is no culture better than other cultures. There is no difference between Western culture, Muslim culture, African culture, Arab culture, Chinese culture, Afghani culture, and Zulu culture. Whatever people do in their culture is true to them, and no one has the right to criticize them. If we follow such logic, then we cannot criticize the Islamic practices of female genital mutilation, child marriage, wife beating, polygamy, and the like of those misogynistic teachings against Muslim women. Before we narrate what is going to happen next after that evil female genital circumcision, we need to define an important academic term, ambivalence. Ambivalence is defined in the dictionary as uncertainty or fluctuation, especially when caused by the inability to make a choice, or by a simultaneous desire to say or do two conflicting things. In psychology, it is the coexistence within an individual of positive and negative feelings toward the same person, object, or action, simultaneously drawing him in opposite directions. In simple language, it is to love and hate the same thing. It is a kind of self-deception. With that in mind, let us see what takes place after the barbaric procedure of the female genital mutilation episode. While living in the USA, Samir and Samira had already heard about evil practices against women in the Muslim world like polygamy, female genital mutilation, child marriage, and wife beating, but one day the couple heard about a practice that they had never heard of it before. It is a practice known as al-Zahar. They have no clue as to whether it has any religious justification. However, since it is practiced only by Muslim women, they decided to include it in their fieldwork. It is exceedingly rare that men involve themselves in this aspect of Muslim women's life. Only in a country like Egypt you can find some men practice al-Zahar too. Al-Zahar is customarily performed on a Muslim woman deemed to be suffering from serious psychological problems under the spell of black magic or is a demon-possessed. For some time, Samira noticed that one of the three rival wives started to behave strangely. She is the newest, youngest, prettiest, and most favored one by her polygamist husband. The Indian wife has already shared her observations with her life partner. Her American husband has advised her that she must watch that wife very closely and try to ascertain the problem. He believes her problem must be early symptoms of a psychological disorder. Samira reported that the woman began to scream for no reason and hallucinate during the day. She also started to speak obsessively about sex and claimed that her husband is having sex with her every night and every day. She said her man is neglecting his other two wives and fucking her everywhere in the house. Everybody around here knows that she is not telling the truth, but she is imagining things that are happening to her. Usually, a Muslim woman is not prone to talk openly about her sex life. Her frankness in such private matters does not sit well in that strict society. She also began to imagine people visiting her and conversing with her. It is public knowledge that she talks by herself while claiming that there are people standing in front of her and speaking to her. Sometimes, she speaks a gibberish language that no one can understand. She claimed she can speak in foreign tongues to the foreigners who visit her every day. She said her foreign visitors are English people, Ethiopians, Indians, and Chinese. Therefore, she said besides her mother tongue Arabic, she can speak English, Amharic, Hindi, and Chinese languages. Samira was born as an Indian girl and can speak English, hence, she knew the wife is lying in her claim of knowing Hindi and English. Gradually, the third wife's problem increased in severity until she began to beat her body and attack anybody comes near her. She started to lose the hair on her head, and she is withering away day by day. Sakina suggested that they must perform al-Zahar on the sick wife. She made that suggestion because she believes that someone had worked black magic on the young wife. She is wife number 3. Samira tried to convince Sakina that the wife is suffering from psychological illness and that she needed to be sent to a psychiatrist. Samir had majored in psychology, and his assessment of the symptoms pointed to a medical problem. The Sudanese, however, have an incredibly low opinion of psychoanalysis. There are 2 or 3 psychiatrist doctors in 2 mental hospitals in Khartoum City, and they all deal with lunatics who are deemed posing social risks. Sakina strongly contested Samir's diagnosis and stood firm in her claim of black magic being the culprit. She argued that even the Prophet Muhammad, with all his holiness and divine protection, was placed under the power of black magic when a Jewish boy cast spells on him. Before we proceed any further, let us first attempt to cast some light on the mechanics of this type of dispute. We must find out whether truly the Prophet of Islam had been bewitched because someone cast spells on him and controlled him. According to the Prophet Muhammad's biography, he came under the influence of black magic, and he behaved exactly like the third Sudanese wife who is under dispute between the educated American husband and the illiterate and religious old woman Sakina. Muhammad used to claim that he had sex with his wives when he had not. He lost the hair of his head and began to wither away day after day. If the old woman Sakina's arguments are true, then we can be able to find some religious justification or authorization to the practice of al-zar. According to Aisha, magic was worked on Allah's apostle so that he used to believe that he had sexual intercourse with his wives while he actually had not. Then one day he said, "O Aisha, do you know that Allah has instructed me concerning the matter I asked him about? 2 men came to me, and one of them sat near my head, and the other sat near my feet. The one near my head asked the other, 'What is wrong with this man?' The latter replied, 'The man is under the effect of magic.' The first one asked, 'Who has worked magic on him?' The other replied, 'Labid ibn al-Asam, a man from Bani Zurayq who was an ally of the Jews, and was a hypocrite.' Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 7, Hadith number 660. The kind of magic that was worked on by the Prophet Muhammad was described by one of his followers as the worst type. A revered companion by the name Aroa related that Aisha said, "The Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, was bewitched by black magic so that he would imagine that he had had intercourse with his wives when he had not." Sufyan said, "This is the worst type of magic when it does to its victim that." Sahih al-Bukhari, the Book of Medicine, Hadith number 79. For 6 months, the Prophet of Islam remained in a state of not knowing what he was doing and fell extremely sick, and lost the hair of his head due to that powerful magic. The Messenger of Allah had a Jewish servant boy. The Jews approached him and kept after him until he gave them some fallen hair from the Prophet as well as a few teeth from his comb. The Jews used these to cast a spell of black magic on him. The person who was behind this was the Jew Labid ibn al-Asam. He then put the hair in a well belonging to Banu Zurayq called Darwan. The Messenger of Allah fell ill for 6 months, during which the hair of his head fell off. He imagined that he slept with his wives, when he did not do that, and was withering away without knowing the cause of his illness. Reason for revealing Surah Al-Falaq 113, verses 1-5, by Ali ibn Ahmed al-Wahidi. The biography of the Prophet Muhammad mentioned that when he experienced the power of black magic, Allah ordered him to use 5 verses from a surah in the Quran to help him to get rid of the spell. See Surah Al-Falaq 113, verses 1-5. Muslim women use the al-zar hoping for the same result. When Muslim men have similar problems, they seek the help of religious men to treat them through the recitation of verses in the Quran. This is called al-Ruqya al-Sharia, lawful exorcism. The verses of the Quran are written on a piece of paper and wrapped and finally made in an amulet or talisman, and the male patient will be told to wear it all time. There is another practice of trying to get rid of an evil spirit, or evil eye, through physically whipping the demon-possessed person. We will not go into that because it does not have a religious basis. Muslim women are not allowed to wear amulets or talismans because they are considered religiously impure or unclean, especially during their menses and child delivery. That being denied to them, Muslim women resort to the al-zar as their only option for relief. At this point, the third wife's illness has progressed to the point that it has robbed her of movement. She has lost all her hair. She is hand-fed by Sakina and Salwa. Of course, the other 2 rival wives wished for her death and eagerly awaited it. They avoided all contact for fear of contagion. According to Sakina and Salwa, the two rival wives are behind that problem. They are the ones who had paid a faqih, a witch doctor or a sorcerer, to work the worst sort of black magic on the third wife. They also supplied him with a few strands of her hair, underwear, shoe, and comb. She is, after all, the youngest, the prettiest, and most favored one among the three rival wives. This information has been whispered in Samira's ear by her best girlfriend Salwa. What Samira saw at the Alzar performance and then described to Samir resembled an exorcism. Chapter 23. The Demonic Rituals of Alzar by Muslim Women. On the day the Alzar was performed, many Muslim women attended the rites. Samira is puzzled by the huge gathering of Sudanese women. Even on the so-called happy occasion of the female genital mutilation did not command such a big crowd. Every woman has been brought by her father or husband. Each man left as soon as his female relative entered the house of the polygamist husband. None of them stepped a foot inside the butcher's house. It would mean war if any man dared to step inside the taboo ground of the women's section in the forbidden territory of the animal's killer and seller. The male intruder would be slain on the spot, and his blood would be upon his shoulders. In a brief time, the house compound is crowded with women, old and young. Children below the age of 9, and all male children, are not allowed to attend the rituals. Needless to say, no men are to be seen. This is exclusively women's religious ritual, and hence only women must attend it and participate in its performance. Alzar has commenced with the slaughter of a big calf, and its blood is then applied on the forehead, face, cheeks, ears, hair, hands, and legs of the possessed wife. The woman who oversaw the Alzar is an elderly woman. She is known as Al-Shika. This is not her name, but an honorable female title. It is the feminine of the sheikh. It means a big religious leader. It is like a rabbi in Judaism, pastor or bishop in Christianity, or sannyasi or maharishi in Hinduism, and imam or mullah in Islam. In this context, the religious leaders are believed to have inherited charisma or divine anointment. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries, sheikh stands for a royal position such as prince, and in Ottoman Turkish Empire like sultan and sultana. The Al-Shika is the biggest woman Samira has ever seen. She looks like three women with one head. When she speaks, her voice is thick as a man's voice. Her hair is dyed red with henna. She does not bother to cover her hair with a hijab or hide her face by a niqab, looking distinctively different from the other Sudanese women. From her Sudanese girlfriend Salwa, the Indian wife Samira Ahmed has learned that the Al-Shika is originally a Turkish woman, born and bred in Sudan. In front of her, a huge drum known as the daloka is placed prominently. On her left side, another woman is sitting, with yet another big daloka in front of her. She, on the other hand, is of Kurdish descent. All other women are black Sudanese except for the two. Those two women are having a mixture of white and red colors in their skins, and other women are all blacks. The Al-Shika is surrounded by a group of women, who are her choir. The lifeless body of the possessed wife is lying on the ground inside the circle that has been created by the huge gathering of women. Every woman is sitting on the ground either cross-legged or on bended knees. Suddenly, the cricket bat-like hands of the Al-Shika began to hammer the huge drum. The other Kurdish woman also followed suit. The choir began to sing in unison at this point. It is more shouting rather than singing. It is not a merry celebration. The Indian girl Samira tried to understand through her Eritrean female interpreter what those women are saying, but Mona is not able to grasp a single word either. Then she consulted Salwa, but she also said she knew nothing of what they are singing. For them, they are singing gibberish. Samira forgot about her inquiry when another strange action caught her attention. She saw suddenly the lifeless body of the possessed wife spring like a rocket fired out of the ground. She is jumping on her feet up and down like a yo-yo, dancing hysterically. She is jumping, bouncing, shouting, throwing her hands in the air, and spreading her legs as if she has discovered a cobra moving beneath her. She is going in circles. Her sudden action made every woman shout for joy and clap her hands. For them, it is a good omen in the power of Alzar to have produced such a quick result. The next development of the dance puzzled Samira. All women went on their knees and started to dance and swing their heads violently in all directions, like table fans. Some women are laughing, some crying, some gnashing their teeth, and some making funny sounds. None of the women is standing on her feet except the sick wife. They look like they have been electrocuted and have lost all bodily functions. They started to look like they are truly possessed by demons. Samira's heart is gripped with fear, but she controlled herself. She is standing out of the huge circle, surrounded by her girlfriends Salwa, Sakina, Mona, and Zahara. So far, they are the only 5 females not taken in with the rhythm of the dance and the grip of the unseen powerful forces in front of them. Samira observed those women closely and asked Salwa to explain what she was observing. While she is conversing with her, Salwa is also carried away by the current and begins to shake and move like the other women. Samira is terrified, noticing how Salwa's face and eyes have suddenly changed. Her eyes widened and her face became pale. Her hijab fell from her head, and her sari came out of her body. Samira sprang away from her and began to pray and ask God for protection. Then Salwa fell to her knees and began to jerk her head and neck violently. She is swinging her head as if she wants to dislocate it from the rest of her body. Her head kept bouncing up and down like a basketball. Samira moved as far as she could from her girlfriend Salwa. By then the old widow Sakina also has tossed herself into the convulsing group dance and began to move like them. She began to scream and utter unintelligible words and swing her head all around her body. Only the 3 foreign girls Samira, Mona, and Zahara remained standing on their feet and looking with great amazement at what is going on. All Sudanese women, young and old, are crawling on their knees, swinging their heads, and jerking their bodies except the Turkish woman Al-Shika, her Kurdish assistant woman, the choir, and the demon-possessed wife. The demon-possessed wife is the only one who is running in circles and doing all kinds of gymnastic movements. This dancing ritual went on for a long time. Samira is quite puzzled by the fact that only she and her 2 Eritrean female helpers are still in control of themselves. Can they also eventually get caught up in that satanic ritual and do like those crazy women? Before she found an answer to her question or explanation to that strange phenomenon, Samira suddenly heard the woman in charge shouted the loudest sound she ever heard, bass. Like a magical word, that bass brought everything to stillness, and a dead silence ensued. One can hear a pin dropping down. Samira understood the word without the need for translation, because the same word is used in the Hindi language, and with the same meaning, enough or stop it. Briefly, the possessed wife stopped her movements, but she started all over again. The Al-Shika woman got irritated and shouted even more loudly, I said BAS. The possessed woman ceased her movements and stood up like a statue. When the Al-Shika saw that the possessed woman is still standing on her feet, she started talking to her. What is your demand? The woman in charge asked. I want to smoke a cigarette, replied the possessed woman. Give him a cigarette to smoke. The Al-Shika is speaking in masculine to the possessed woman, as if she is a man. The possessed wife also is speaking as a man rather than a woman. Moreover, she is talking in a broken Arabic, as if it is not her mother tongue. She is pronouncing it in a funny accent as foreigners do when they try to speak Arabic. At once, one of the choir women brought a cigarette and handed it over to the possessed woman. Then she used a matchstick and lit the cigarette for her. The possessed wife began to smoke as if she is an experienced smoker. She neither coughed nor made any expression to indicate that it is her first time smoking. Samira's wonder reached beyond her comprehension. In a Muslim country, a young Muslim woman smoking a cigarette in front of everyone. That is incredible. A Sudanese Muslim woman will get killed by her father or husband if she smokes a cigarette. Drinking alcohol by a Muslim woman is worse than committing adultery or taking drugs. Do you have any more demands? Resumed the Al-Shika. I want a shirt and trousers, responded the possessed woman, while she is still smoking her cigarette. A couple of women brought a shirt and a pair of trousers and handed them over to her. Samira could not believe her eyes when she saw the young woman stripping all her clothes off and then putting on her shirt and trousers. The clothes fitted her perfectly, as if they had been tailored especially for her. Samira has never seen any Sudanese woman, even a small child, putting on a shirt and trousers. All the women she saw in Khartoum city and En Nahid town were covered from head to foot by Sudanese saris and concealed their heads and hair with hijabs. Some of them put on the Saudis' abaya and covered their faces with niqab. Samira felt a bit embarrassed to see a young Muslim woman standing in her underwear and bra amid such a huge gathering of women, and then putting on a shirt and trousers. The possessed woman has been mysteriously transformed from a dumb Sudanese young woman into a beautiful Western girl. She looks more feminine and more beautiful and sexier in her Western dress. Her big boobs and large backside made her look hot in her shirt and tight trousers. She is putting on a shirt without a bra. What is your jinn? Shouted again the Al-Shika woman. Khawaja, replied the possessed woman. What is his name? I am Khawaja, Mr. John. Through her female interpreter, Samira learned that the word Khawaja means a white man. Then she innocently asked her female interpreter to explain to her why the possessed wife claimed that the demon that possessed her was a white man called Mr. John. The Eritrean girl is as clueless as her. Mr. Khawaja John, before you leave, do you have any more demands? I want whiskey to drink, demanded Mr. Khawaja John. We don't have whiskey. We have sherry and vodka. Give me sherry. Give him sherry to drink. One woman brought a bottle of sherry and gave it to Mr. Khawaja. The possessed woman grabbed the bottle and opened it immediately. She emptied half of it in her stomach, as if she drank water. Then she asked for another cigarette. When the cigarette was given to her, she asked for a chair. At once an armchair is brought to her. It seemed that, if Mr. Khawaja asked for the moon, the women may have tried to procure it. Then the possessed woman sat on the chair, folded her right leg, and placed it on her left knee. She emptied the rest of the sherry bottle into her stomach, and began to smoke her second cigarette. She is like a great Arab sultana surrounded by her royal entourage. Her genie is like the demon that sprang out of Aladdin's magical lamp and ready to fulfill her 3 wishes. Samira began to converse again with her girlfriend Silwa, who by then came out of her trance. She asked her whether the bottle contained real alcohol or just red grape juice. Silwa was assured by Allah that the bottle contained real alcohol. Samira is perplexed by such strange behavior in a Muslim country. She does not know what to say or what to ask any longer. Her brain cannot digest anything anymore. How a young married Muslim woman could be allowed to ask for cigarettes to smoke, dress up in shirt and trousers, drink alcohol in her own house, and most probably with the prior knowledge of her Muslim husband, and everything had been bought by his money. If she has not seen it with her own eyes, the Indian wife would not have believed it even if her American husband saw it and retold it to her. Samira is just wondering what the possessed wife will demand further. Dasaderkum Aulad Mama, Dasaderkum Aulad Mama, repeated the Al-Shika. She is no longer shouting. This time, she spoke to Mr. Khawaja with all due respect. The female interpreter could not interpret that difficult Arabic phrase. Loosely translated can possibly mean, "What is your constitution, O children of Mama?" But I have no idea who is that Mama. Is she, Mamma Mia? I want to drink blood. Blood of man, shouted the possessed woman with so much anger and determination. Give him blood to drink, responded the Alshika. A woman came running along with a big glass of red liquid in her hand. At first, Samira is under the impression that the liquid is a juice symbolizing human blood, and she decides to confirm her conclusion by consulting with her Sudanese girlfriend. She is certain that those women could not possibly extract that amount of blood from a man in such an abbreviated time. Even Aladdin's genie could not be that fast. Besides, there is no man around to kill and suck out his blood. But Solwa refuted Samira's suspicions and announced with all confidence that it is real blood. Samira refused to believe her and asked her to confirm under solemn oath by swearing through her holy Quran, exalted Allah, and her blessed Prophet Muhammad that it is indeed real blood. If she said yes, Samira would have decided to flee for dear life. She is afraid that the possessed woman may demand the slaughter of one of the 3 foreign girls as a human korban for her. When she was in India, she heard the Hindu goddess of death Kali demands the sacrifice of a human being for her during her demonic rituals. Solwa swore by Allah and pain of blindness to both her eyes that it is real blood, but that of the blood of the slaughtered calf. By then the possessed woman had fully consumed the blood and tossed the empty glass away, not bothering on which woman's head it might land. It hit one woman on her shoulder, but she tolerated it due to the fear of offending her female attacker. With eyes full of fire due to the alcohol she had drunk, she looked angrily at the Turkish woman in charge and shouted, "I want a whip." One woman immediately responded to her demand and gave her a long whip. Samira was so frightened when she saw the possessed woman standing in the middle holding in her right hand a cat of 9 tails long whip. Is she about to rampage and whip every woman she does not like, or does any female look like a man? Samira saw the possessed woman pacing up and down like a restless demon, and striking the air with her big whip. Meanwhile, she is challenging an imaginary man with the filthiest Arabic language that could possibly be uttered by a married Sudanese woman. Come out before me, you coward of a man. Come to me and I will skin your flesh out with my whip. I will fuck you up with my penis. I am a Khawaja, a white man with a big mustache. Come here and fight with me, Awad al-Manioka, O son of a fucking bitch. Kosomak, Yawad al-Sharmuda, I will fuck your mother's pussy, O son of a dirty prostitute. The demon-possessed woman went on and on until she lost her voice. No one reproached her, neither challenged her nor rebuked her for speaking such vulgarity. At length, the big drums came to life when the Turkish woman Alshika huge hands, and the Kurdish woman's big arms fell on them like hammers hitting the big drums of war. The singing, shouting, crying, jerking of bodies, and swinging of heads resumed, with the possessed woman jumping, dancing, and cracking her whip into the air. It is simply a bit of mere luck that she has not hit any of the attending women. Of course, there is no man to come forth and answer her challenge of a fight. After a similar round of hysterical dancing, Samira heard the familiar command, "Bass or stop it." The second bass brought about a different result from the first one. It has not only brought everything to a stop, but the possessed woman has fallen to the ground unconscious. She felt like she had been shot in her head at point-blank range. 3 women covered her with a big red sari. That done, they bore her into the room from which they had brought her out before. After that, Samira noticed every woman smiling and whispering into the ears of their respective neighbors. She surmised their elation indicated that the Al-Zar ritual was a success, and had delivered the required result. Solwa confirmed her guess and added that the genie of the white man, who is called Mr. John, has left peacefully without hurting the third wife because all his demands were met. Soon after, huge trays of cooked delicious Sudanese dishes and lemon and mango juices were served by young teenage girls to all the women. After the food was consumed, many women clapped their hands and shouted with their mouths and tongues Zagarit al-Farah, or ululation of joy. Chapter 24. Why the Muslim woman is rebellious and confused. The American couple Samir and Samira kept pondering over the deliverance dance through Al-Zar for quite a long time. Since that day, Samira kept a close watch on the third wife, but does not see any demonic or psychological symptoms manifesting themselves again. She looked entirely normal, much her usual self as before the incident of her serious sickness. At first, the couple concluded that she was truly demon-possessed, but could not understand how the satanic ritual released her from her devils. Not finding a convincing explanation, Samir is inclined to look at the matter as a psychological problem. He reasoned out that wife number 3 is like any oppressed and abused Muslim woman, but her coping skills could no longer deal with the negative stimuli around her, and she suffered a serious psychological problem. Her psychological problem was caused by the oppression and abuse she suffered since childhood under the hands of her father and brothers, and continued with her arranged and forced marriage to her polygamist husband, the butcher. The descriptions of Samira of the way wife number 3 behaved on the day of the Al-Zar ritual led Samir to the following conclusion. According to him, the deeply oppressed soul of the woman could not rebel due to the religious restrictions imposed on her since childhood. The religious restrictions gave the man full rights over her. There was nothing she could do to free herself from her shackles. If she tried to protest or rebel, she would go against what she held as sacred in her Muslim society. She hated what she loved, she abhorred what she venerated, and she loathed the man whom she longed to have. She was caught up in an ambivalent state with absolutely no way out. Only someone else other than herself and from outside of her society and country could deliver her from her insolvable problems. That day, with her strange demands, she had rebelled against all her religious restrictions and her draconian social system, which showed favor to the man and allowed him to oppress women. Otherwise, why did she want to become a powerful man, smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, and consume the blood of men? She wanted to dress up like a man and not a woman. She hated her destiny in life which made her born a woman. Why did she pretend to be possessed by the spirit of a white man who had a big mustache and looked for a man to challenge him in a fight? For her, the white man is the symbol of power. It was he that colonized and controlled Sudan for the longest time. The whip was one of the tools that her father and husband had used to curtail any insolence from her. She wanted a whip to show that she also possessed the power of a man, not that of a cowardly Sudanese man, but the authority of a powerful white man called Mr. Kujajan. The powerful white man colonized Sudan for a long time, treated Sudanese men as his slaves and forced them to do to him whatever he liked. It is the same way the Sudanese man is doing to his women. Therefore, the white man created his own laws and enslaved the Sudanese men. Likewise, the alleged prophet of God Muhammad created the so-called divinely revealed laws and made the Muslim men enslave their women. The American husband Samir's psychoanalysis of the rebellious oppressed soul of wife number 3 is confirmed when Salwa told his Indian wife Samira about another young Sudanese woman who exhibited even more extreme behavior under the same Al-Zar rites. The woman had likewise demanded a shirt and trousers, cigarettes, a bottle of vodka, and the blood of man. After she consumed half of the vodka and drank the symbolic blood, she demanded the liver and heart of the man to be given to her because she wanted to eat them. When those organs were presented to her, she devoured them raw. In Sudan, eating raw meat of some organs of a slaughtered animal such as liver, heart, and intestines is not considered too morbid. Ethiopians go further than that and eat raw meat of animals. If you visit any Ethiopian restaurant in America or a European country, you can see in the food menu listed raw meat. After she ate the raw organs of the animal which symbolize the cowardly Muslim man's heart and liver, the young Sudanese woman demanded a sword. When a double-edged sword was given to her, a great disaster took place. The young woman managed to run out of the house into the streets, in men's garments with a big double-edged sword in her right hand. She started to attack and chase only men. Women were spared by her. She wanted to slay her bitter enemy, the cowardly Sudanese man. This occurred on a Friday, being a holiday, with the public market being crowded with merchants, customers, beggars, loafers, and many stray animals. Every man fled for his life at the sight of a deranged woman brandishing a shining sword and making her way toward him. They mistook her for a dangerous madwoman. She entered the market from one end, and when she came out the opposite end, she had emptied out the whole market. Hundreds of men took flight from her vicious attack. They fled town and headed for the desert. Unfortunately, none of them found a tree or a hole to hide in. For them, it was like the Second Battle of Uhud, when the Muslim Mujahideen were chased by the polytheist army of Mecca and had to leave their Prophet Muhammad fallen in a ditch, beaten up and seriously wounded. The fleeing Mujahideen of Uhud were lucky enough to find a mountain and a cliff to hide in, but the men of En-Nahid market had no such refuge except the arid desert. Their speed slowed down by the sand of the Sahara Desert. Their chaser reached close to them. Before she could behead any cowardly Muslim man, the local policeman managed to stop her. The police followed her in their wagon to the outskirts of town, where they rammed her with their patrol car. She was injured and eventually arrested. That brave woman ended up in the worst prison in the world. It is known as the Shala Central Prison. Shortly after her detention, she was tried and convicted. She was given the maximum sentence and sent to Shala Central Prison to serve 14 years under hard labor. The judge wanted her hanged, but the jury did not back up his decision because the suspected woman's crime did not deserve capital punishment, as she killed none. In reality, Shala is not even a prison. It is a heavily secured area where the worst criminals are kept. It has no dorms or cells. The prisoners have no roofs over their heads and must protect themselves somehow from the blazing sun of Africa. They use their own clothes to protect their heads from the heat during the day and the cold during the night. Besides that, they must protect themselves from the scorpions and snakes of the arid desert. All these hardships are nothing compared to the human beasts the prisoner must fight against to survive in Shala. A prisoner may survive in a Roman amphitheater fighting against gladiators and wild beasts, but the notorious prison of Nyala City is quite another story. Ever since that incident, the woman in charge, who is called Alzar al-Shika, disallowed deadly weapons during the ritual. She can concede and permit to an empty revolver or any unloaded rifle, but nothing more. She also banned the use of all other hand weapons such as wooden axes, swords, daggers, knives, hammers, metal hatchets, and any other white weapons. She can allow the woman to have a whip and nothing else. She knows no woman can whip a man to death before other men attack her and save her victim from her. Samir is hoping that his wife can get another chance to attend another Alzar ritual so that they can learn more about it. Sulwa told Samira that the Alzar dance will be performed only on a woman possessed by the Al-Jini Al-Ahmar, the red demon, or the Al-Ri Al-Ahmar, the red devilish wind. Sulwa said that the woman who oversaw the Alzar, Al-Shika, is herself possessed by a Jinni, but she is on good terms with her Jinni. She inherited her demon from her mother, who got it from her grandmother, and so on. Since the demon passed through inheritance, he is not harmful, but a good demon. The Malays, Indonesians, and the Southeast Asian Muslims have the same thing. They are called sakas. Some are benign, some are not. As Muslims, they coexist in a spirit world with shamans and witch doctors, tolerated even to this day of the Internet, Google, AI, or artificial intelligence, and the advanced life. The American couple found it difficult to believe the concept of an inherited demon, good or otherwise. According to their Christian faith, no one can pass a demon to his progeny, and there is nothing called a good demon. The demon is the demon. He is a fallen angel and hence called an evil spirit, or unclean spirit, and does nothing good but evil. The Southeast Asian Muslims believe, as it is written, that there are spirits that inherit this world. Some of them are Muslims and fear Judgment Day. All, according to them, fear the Quran, or whoever wields it, albeit with some ceremonial props. They are used for everything, making a woman fall in love with a man she hates, stopping a husband from marrying another woman besides his first wife, business success, influencing decisions, causing trouble, stealing, killing, and raping. Posters abound advertising services ridding you of bad luck, black magic, an evil eye, and these evil spirits.